to play second fiddle to the white man all his days. He liked his master, but he likes the Yankee better, not because he regards him as his deliverer, but mainly because the two-handed thrift of the Northerner, his varied and wonderful ability, completely captivates the imagination of the black man, just learning to shift for himself. How far he is caught, or is capable of being imbued with the Yankee spirit of enterprise and industry, remains to be seen. In some things he has already shown himself an apt scholar. I notice, for instance, that he is about as industrious an office seeker as the most patriotic among us, and that he learns with amazing ease and rapidity all the arts and wiles of the politicians. He is versed in parades, mass meetings, caucuses, and will soon shine on the stump. I observe also that he is not far behind us in the observance of the fashions, and that he is as good a church goer, theatre goer, and pleasure seeker generally as his means will allow. As a boot black or newsboy he is adept in all the tricks of the trade, and as a fast young man about town among his kind he is worthy his white prototype. The swagger, the impertinent look, the coarse remark, the loud laugh, are all in the best style. As a lounger and starer also, on the street corners of a Sunday afternoon, he has taken his degree. On the other hand, I know cases among our colored brethren, plenty of them, of conscientiousness and well-directed effort and industry in the worthiest fields, in agriculture, in trade, in the mechanic arts, that show the colored man has in him all the best rudiments of a citizen of the States. Lest my winter sunshine appear to have too many dark rays in it, buzzards, crows, and colored men, I hasten to add the brown and neutral tints, and maybe a red ray can be extracted from some of these hard, smooth, sharp-gritted roads that radiate from the national capital. Leading out of Washington, there are several good roads that invite the pedestrian. There is the road that leads west or northwest from Georgetown, the Tennessee road, the very sight of which, on a sharp, lustrous winter Sunday, makes the feet tingle. Where it cuts through a hill or a high knoll, it is so red it fairly glows in the sunlight. I'll warrant you will kindle, and your own color will mount, if you resign yourself to it. It will conduct you to the wild and rocky scenery of the upper Potomac, to Great Falls, and on to Harper's Ferry, if your carriage holds out. Then there is the road that leads north over Meridian Hill, across Piney Branch, and on through the wood of Crystal Springs to Fort Stevens, and so into Maryland. This is the proper route for an excursion in the spring to gather wild flowers, or in the fall for a nutting expedition, as it lays open some noble woods and a great variety of charming scenery, or for a musing moonlight saunter, say in December, when the enchantress has folded and folded the world in her web. It is by all means the course to take. Your staff rings on the hard ground, the road, a misty white belt, gleams and vanishes before you. The woods are cavernous and still, the fields lie in a lunar trance, and you will yourself return fairly mesmerized by the beauty of the scene. Or you can bend your steps eastward over the eastern branch, up Good Hope Hill, and on till you strike the Marlborough Pike, as a trio of us did that cold February Sunday we walked from Washington to Pumpkintown and back. A short sketch of this pilgrimage is a fair sample of these winter walks. The delight I experienced in making this new acquisition to my geography was of itself sufficient to atone for any aches or weariness I may have felt. The mere fact that one may walk from Washington to Pumpkintown was a discovery I had been all these years in making. I had walked to Sligo and to Northwest Branch, and had made the Falls of the Potomac in a circuitous route of 10 miles, coming suddenly upon the river in one of its wildest passes, but I little dreamed all the while that there, in a wrinkle, or shall I say furrow, of the Maryland hills, almost visible from the outlook of the bronze squaw on the dome of the Capitol, and just around the head of Oxen Run, lay Pumpkintown. The day was cold, but the sun was bright, and the foot took hold of those dark, dry, gritty Maryland roads with the keenest relish. How the levels of the Laurel glistened! The distant oak woods suggested grey blue smoke, while the recesses of the pines looked like the lair of night. Beyond the district limits we struck the Marlborough Pike, which, round and hard and white, held squarely to the east and was visible a mile ahead. Its friction brought up the temperature amazingly and spurred the pedestrians into their best time. As I trudged along, Thoreau's lines came naturally to mind: "When the spring stirs my blood with the instinct of travel, I can get enough gravel on the old Marlborough road." Cold as the day was, many degrees below freezing, I heard and saw bluebirds, and as we passed along, every sheltered tangle and overgrown field or lane swarmed with snowbirds or sparrows, the latter mainly Canada or tree sparrows, with a sprinkling of the song and, maybe, one or two other varieties. The birds are all social and gregarious in winter, and seem drawn together by common instinct. Where you find one, you will not only find others of the same kind, but also several different kinds. The regular winter residents go in little bands, like a well organized pioneer corps, the jays and woodpeckers in advance, doing the heavier work. The nuthatches next, more lightly armed, and the creepers and kinglets, with their slender beaks and microscopic eyes, last of all. [Footnote: It seems to me this is a borrowed observation, but I do not know whom to credit it.] Now and then among the grey and brown tints there was a dash of scarlet, the cardinal grosbeak, whose presence was sufficient to enliven any scene. In the leafless trees, as a ray of sunshine fell upon him, he was visible a long way off, glowing like a crimson spar, the only bit of colour in the whole landscape. Maryland is here rather a level, unpicturesque country. The gaze of the traveller bounded, at no great distance, by oak woods, with here and there a dark line of pine. We saw few travellers, passed a ragged squad or two of coloured boys and girls, and met some coloured women on their way to or from church, perhaps. Never asked a coloured person, at least the crude, rustic specimens, any question that involves a memory of names or any arbitrary signs. You will rarely get a satisfactory answer. If you could speak to them in their own dialect, or touch the right spring in their minds, you would, no doubt, get the desired information. They are as local in their notions and habits as the animals, and go on much the same principles, as no doubt we all do, more or less. I saw a coloured boy come into a public office one day, and ask to see a man with red hair. The name was utterly gone from him. The man had red whiskers, which was as near as he had come to the mark. Ask your washerwoman what street she lives on, or where such a one has moved to, and the chances are that she cannot tell you, except that it is a right smart distance this way or that, or near Mr. So and so, or by such and such a place, describing some local feature. I love to amuse myself when walking through the market by asking the old aunties, and the young aunties too, the names of their various "yarbs." It seems as if they must trip on the simplest names. Bloodroot they generally call grubroot. Trailing arbutus goes by the name of trawling arbutus. Training arbudi flower and ground ivory. In Virginia they call woodchucks moonocks. On entering Pumpkin Town, a cluster of 5 or 6 small whitewashed blockhouses, towing squarely on the highway, the only inhabitant we saw was a small boy, who was as frank and simple as if he had lived on pumpkins and marrow squashes all his days. Half a mile farther on we turned to the right into a characteristic southern road, a way entirely unkempt, and wandering free as the wind, now fading out into a broad field, now contracting into a narrow track between hedges, anon roaming with delightful abandon through swamps and woods, asking no leave and keeping no bounds. About 2 o'clock we stopped in an opening in a pine wood and ate our lunch. We had the good fortune to hit upon a charming place. A wood chopper had been there, and let in the sunlight full and strong, and the white chips, the newly piled wood, and the mounds of green boughs were welcome features, and helped also to keep off the wind that would creep through